Tanks, guns, armor, all tried and tested on the battlefield. Now some of it is here in central Indiana on our streets being used to keep us safe. It's surplus military hardware that's found a new home.
Fox 59's Russ McQuaid tonight shows us how some of our local police departments are now armed for war.
Surplus U.S. military hardware is coming home from the wars, being assigned to the streets and back roads of central Indiana to keep Hoosiers safe at a time of escalating homeland violence. Once it patrolled Afghanistan. Now it's an armored SWAT vehicle with windshields that can take a direct hit from a .50 caliber weapon, a gun turret up top, and the armor to protect at least a half dozen cops inside.
When I first started, we really didn't have the violence that we see today. The weaponry is totally different now than it was in the beginning of my career. Plus, you have a lot of people that are coming out of the military that have the ability and the knowledge to build IEDs and to defeat law enforcement.
Your average American citizen, conservatives, patriots, and definitely returning military. Why aren't people seeing this? Well, perhaps because their local news stations are massaging it into their brain that this is completely normal.
Under a state of emergency and will be until January 2017.
French people have indeed become accustomed to seeing soldiers, heavily armed soldiers, patrolling the streets.
The 45th President of the United States.
It's being called the most stunning upset in political history.
A second night of anti-Trump protests in cities across the country. Some turning violent. In Portland, police say a rally turned into a riot when demonstrators started vandalizing vehicles and buildings, throwing things at police and blocking this bridge. Some so upset they...
What it is basically is a roadmap to totalitarian global government, and they don't even really bother to hide it that much anymore. The slogans, transforming our world, and nobody's going to be left behind, and they emphasize this over and over again. Nobody is going to be left behind. You cannot run to the woods. There's no escaping this, right? So if you think I'm going to build a bunker and I'm going to save a lot of food, that's not going to work. Nobody is going to be left behind. But the end goal really is very simply a totalitarian world system. They call it the New World Order a lot. If you listen to their speeches, George Bush in 1991 went on TV, said the purpose of me invading Iraq under the UN is to create a new world order. And he told us what the New World Order was, right? It's a world where the UN peacekeeping forces can implement the vision of the UN's founders, who we went over at the beginning, right? Stalin, Alger Hiss, these types of people. Why would we want UN peacekeeping forces implementing this totalitarian vision? Well, I don't know, ask George Bush. So the strategy they've given us this to is divide the world up into these regional governments, and no country will be allowed to be left out of these things. That's why they freaked out about the Brexit, right? And they're doing everything they can to prevent the British from actually leaving the European Union. Then they'll have to stick them in another regional government. They want a global currency, they want a global education system, et cetera, et cetera. And here's what Henry Kissinger told us. I call him Henry New World Order Kissinger. He released a book in 2014, World Order. And whenever you hear world order, you can just substitute the word order for government and you get a picture of what they're talking about. And he says, the contemporary quest for world order will require a coherent strategy to establish a concept of order within the various regions and then to relate these regional orders to one another. Even Sarah Palin, love her or hate her, whatever, but she's, important figure in our political.
Elsewhere, tensions are running high across America as more protests are held over the killing of black men by police. Demonstrators shut down major roads in several US cities on Saturday, leading to arrests, scuffles and confrontations between law enforcement and activists.
As you know, we've inherited quite a budget crunch from President Trump. How bad is it, Secretary Van Houten?
We're broke.
I'm right behind him. Not supposed to stare at it directly, but I can't help it. If I touch it, will it heal my baldness? Oh.
Talking Points believes enough is enough with the anti-Trump movement. Man won the election, give him a chance.
And now you're going to run for president. Don't you think that's a really cool idea, you guys? You'll keep them honest. You'll keep them honest, Donald. Personally, I hope you win, because I can't wait for the the inauguration.
Well, let the indefinite detention and torture begin. It hasn't even been a month since President Obama signed the controversial bill into law, and we are now seeing it become a reality. The National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA as it's called, allows the government to detain and torture without trial anyone accused of having ties to terrorism, and that includes U.S. citizens.
Disregard, as the president himself had insisted on these powers, insisted on no exclusion for U.S. citizens, and wanted the freedom not to ship all prisoners into military detention, but to detain them and handle them through non-military, CIA and other means as well, which he called flexibility, which some people might call tyranny. And so he had the bill worsened both in Congress and in the conference committee, and further again through his signing statement, which was obscured by the fact that in a very strange and unprecedented manner, he also, in that same signing statement, promised not to use some of the powers that he was hereby creating for all future presidents.
In the possession
or
of that
might
individual.
take the firearms first and then go to court, because that's another system. Because a lot of times by the time you go to court, it takes so long to go to court to get the due process procedures. I like taking the guns early, like in this.
It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel.
The demon was huge, and it came to me and it was trying to have sex with me.
In the divine right to rule.
We therefore invite Mr. Sayer, Master of the Apple Tree Tavern, to take the chair as our first Grand Master.
In the divine right to rule.
In the divine right to rule. In the divine right to rule.
Napoleon, Alexander the Great, Donald Trump, we're all cut from the same cloth.
Alexander the Great, his mother, she worshipped in a temple where they revered serpents.
Who knew? You and Dick Cheney cousins?
You know, listen, I don't think I'm going to family reunion. I don't know how I'll be greeted. But no, you know, these folks have been doing all these genealogies on me, and right. You know, they've found all sorts of strange connections.
This got me. What did you make of that story? For those who don't know this, so Lynn Cheney, the vice president's wife, has been doing some genealogy connected to her latest book, and lo and behold, way back, 8 generations ago,
8 generations or
you
something.
and Mr. Cheney apparently have some distant relative. What did you make of that story when it came?
You know, I actually knew about it because somebody had done some genealogy before, and they had sent it to me, this long sheet, and you know, had all these famous names, you know, Mark Twain and this and that and the other, and then Dick Cheney, and I took a pause.
George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, William Howard Taft, and President Barack Obama. One young girl traced them all back to one common ancestor.
They're all cousins and all grandsons of John Lackland.
It's the first family tree of its kind, pouring through more than 500,000 names for months. 12-year-old Bridge Ann d'Avignon discovered that all the U.S. presidents, except Martin Van Buren, are related to the former King of England, John Lackland Plantagenet, signer of the Magna Carta in 1215.
Together you shall spread light to age-negative people. And again, there's 15% of them on this planet, may have come from outside sources.
A certain group of people on this earth do feel like that they have the right to rule over you. It makes no difference whether it's a monarchy, a republic, a democracy, or a outright dictatorship, or whatever. They feel like they have been given that right. And we call them the global elite. Now, there's a lot of information available about this, and I'm going to take you back to Margaret Sanger. But first I want to make a quote by Kevin Trudeau. This man is a billionaire, and this information's all over the web. And here's what he's supposed to have said. He stated that elitists he had talked to through their plans were for the greater good of humanity. They know what's best for you. but that they believed there were two classes of people on earth, two classes, only two, the ruling elite and the worker bees, and that the elite were defined, now watch carefully, listen carefully, the elite were not defined necessarily by money or power, but by their genetic ancestry. Now we get into race, we get into the root race, we get into the issue, their genetic ancestry. In plain words, they inherited this.
My name is John Paul Kane. I am a school teacher currently teaching kindergarten. Oh, I'm also a drag performer. Named Facelift.
N01.
These animals that we know are genetic males have been exposed to atrazine for their entire life. And many of these genetic males now are turning into females. You can see he's got eggs that kind of look like they're in a sack. These are actually yolked eggs ready to be laid.
So Drag Queen Story Time, it's just a wonderful time for me to be able to bring my love of working with kids with my performance. I've always been very sort of creative and dramatic. I don't know, there's just something that's kind of magical in the transformation. I know I'm still me. Ultimately, my kids, they influence a lot of the style of how Faye has evolved over the last 10 years. The music that I choose, the sort of brightness to the colors of the costumes I wear. So if anything, the kids have inspired her more than I would say anything else. When you think about it, really, bringing drag performers together with little kids is kind of a perfect relationship. And
what's happening is you're skewing sex ratios. You can get genetic bottlenecking, which can cause crashes. And quite frankly, if you're a genetic male, it'd be nice if you developed as a genetic male. And now we have a chemical very common in the environment that's effectively sex reversing animals. I'm going to show you something pretty amazing, scientifically speaking.
it's kind of like drag performers are clowns, right? Like they really sort of, they play things up, they're over the top, they're like a cartoon come to life. Welcome to Faye and Fluffy's story time. Reading is fundamental. I'm hoping what the kids get out of coming to story time is an opportunity to see that things that are different aren't scary, that things that are different are amazing. That's kind of what is so incredible about the reading, is that you get families from all sort of backgrounds and experience.
On the other hand, I am worried. This is the most common contaminant in ground and surface water and drinking water. And the level of atrazine that it took to make this male turn into a female is 3 times less than what's allowed in our drinking water.
And relationships and gender identities and everything. And to see that diversity in people is what needs to be celebrated. And the more that we're exposed to that, the more comfortable we become with each other. The grassroots aspect of what this is that you're giving these little morsels of stuff to these kids who are really honestly some of the most powerful teachers that are out there in the world. So I'm hoping that it's like, you know, dropping a